with an amazingly talented drum tech, John Aldridge. And the reason you're talented is not only for your teching skills, but you were first known for your engraving skills.
Right.
So give us a little history about how you got into that.
Well, engraving is it's an old art that's kind of been forgotten, and I discovered that by trying to get something engraved once. And you really can't get things engraved very easily.
Oh,
Leedys and Ludwigs
okay.
and duplexes and Slingerlands and Gretsch all had
They
an
all did
engraved
back
model.
in the day.
You know, and the last one that produced a hand engraved model was Gretsch in '67 to 71.
Okay.
They had a gold engraved drum. Ludwig discontinued their hand engraved drums in 1935, and I started wanting a drum in 1981, 82, and couldn't afford an engraved drum back then. The Black Beauty in the early 80s was $500-600, and I was a school teacher and didn't have enough money to buy one. So I found an old engraver, learned how to engrave from him, messed up just a whole bunch of crap until I got good enough to do it. And about that time, Ludwig called, and I started working for them.
So was that a lost art at the time? Like no one else was engraving. I mean,
Well,
it's
it's changed.
Historically, you could see the drums being.
Sure.
But was someone actually engraving at the time you started?
Engraving drums?
Yes.
No.
Nobody. So it was the dead art. I mean.
Yeah, nobody.
You resurrected it, basically.
I brought it back to the drum industry. Engraving is still
Right.
alive and well in the jewelry industry
Okay.
and in the gun industry. But for the most part, even in those two industries, it's gone to machine engraving. I push the blade with my hand. I don't use any hammers. I just use regular engraver blades. And it's very easy to learn. I learned how to do it in about 10 minutes.
Okay, so these blades, I mean, how thick are these blades?
They're about this long.
Okay.
About 4 inches long, about maybe that thick, but they have a square point to them.
Oh,
So
okay.
that when you're walking the blade along the thing, it creates a zigzag line.
Okay.
And depending on how much pressure and the angle you hold that determines the shape of the zigzag in the line. It can be an almost smooth line, or it can be just like a zigzag stitch on a sewing machine.
Okay, you make it sound like it's easy, but it seems to me it seems almost impossible.
No, it's just a matter of
Yeah.
which angle you
and
hold your
there's
hand at.
Right, and there's one person that can do it.
Well, but no, seriously, I'm not saying that just to be modest, but if you put your finger down on something and you walk it along, that's all I'm doing. I'm planting that blade in the middle and I'm walking along just like that.
Right, but I mean, okay, one guy can play paradiddles and another guy can play them better. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I learned how to engrave because I wanted an engraved drum, not because I wanted to be an engraver.
Okay.
I had no desire to be
All right.
a guy who did that. I just happened to wind up being that because nobody else was.
Okay.
And it became a way that I could make more money than I was making before.
Was there a not so modern drum company and now it's a vintage drum company?
Yep, that was mine.
So you called it that because of the magazine?
I called it the Not So Modern Drum Company because of, we're making basically old-looking drums. And
I see.
and when I sold Not So Modern Drummer to Bill Ludwig III back in 2007, I had to change my name of my company because he didn't want to build drums. He just wanted a magazine. So I sold him the magazine, and I changed the name of my drum company to Vintage Drum Company.
And you have
so
that now?
Yeah.
And you'll custom do work for somebody
Right.
who just...
I only do maybe a dozen drums a year that way. I'll build a dozen drums a year for people who really want one done by me. The rest of the time, if you wanted a drum like I would build it, I would send you to Joyful Noise because that's a company that I've been working with for the last few years, trying to help establish their line and figure out how to make a better snare drum that sounds really
Okay,
good.
you're talking about building the drums, but do you actually build the drums?
Well, I have the shells made.
You have the shells made and the rest
because
you put
I don't
together?
have the skill of rolling metal and welding. Okay, but I have those things done by other people. They take a drawing that I make and they build the shell for me. Now, with Joyful Noise, they're building a shell that's a combination of a 20s Ludwig, a 50s Ludwig, an 80s Ludwig. It's got all these different pieces of different drums interwoven into different areas in the shell, and it sounds like a really, really good old drum. It produces a lot of tones, and that's my goal in building a drum is to make a drum that'll make any sound you want it to make. You can always take it out, but you can't put it in there if it's not there to begin with.
Okay.
So, but to get back on it, I don't build that many drums. Mostly I engrave drums for other people. Either a drum company will send me a bunch of shells to engrave, and they'll have a pattern, or I'll suggest a pattern, or I'm just reproducing something that I've done before in the past.
A lot of your drums have a floral pattern, kind of a flowing pattern, really pretty kind of pattern, and then I saw this fish drum, this Tama fish drum, and I thought that looks so different.
Yeah, well, that's the joy of custom work. When you're working with individuals and you're trying to fulfill that person's vision of what he wants his drum to look like. That's where that fish came from. That fella drew that fish for me.
Okay.
And I just transferred it onto the drum and engraved it.
It just seemed like you had to be so much more intricate, detailed on something that little.
It is a little bit more of a pain in the butt just because you have to do each scale on every fish. And God bless
and
America.
Basically, it's still the same tool.
Yeah. There's no machinery anywhere in it.
Yeah. Do you have smaller tools for some of that stuff?
I have 4 different blades that I use.
All right.
One's about maybe a 64th of an inch wide. One's maybe a 32nd of an inch wide. One's maybe a 16th, and one's an 8th. And I have one really wide one that's maybe 3/16 that I use just for really wide special fills. So.
Okay, you can't really make a mistake though, or it's
no, you make a mistake, it's part of it.
So it's like you may have to make the leaf a little bigger, or does that ever happen?
when I first started out, a lot of my patterns are really irregular, and you'll find a lot of birds and vines and clusters of grapes in them. And wherever there's a cluster of grapes or a bird or a vine, you can bet that blade skidded off somewhere.
Okay.
And wound up creating a line that I could see, okay, what can I make out of that line? And that's what you do. A lot of patterns evolve from that. Like, if you're doing something, it's the same exact pattern on every panel. If you mess up one panel, you got to go back and mess up all 20 of them to make it look uniform. And sometimes it just creates a heck of a lot of work. Working on those titanium drums for rondinette, those are the really, really, it's not a hard metal, but it's just not a very forgiving metal. If you slip on it, you've slipped. You're gone. There's no way to recover.
How long it's got to vary, but how long does it take to do a drum? Do you finish it in one shot, or do you kind of have to let your eyes refocus?
It depends on the complexity of the pattern and how big the drum is, how many panels there are, how much they want done on it. Like say a 90th anniversary Black Beauty from 1999. Those were a really sparse pattern. It was a scroll design, but it was a single scroll with very few fills in it. That drum would take me about 3 hours to do one of them. But to do a 100th anniversary drum takes about 12 hours, and you can't do it all in 12 hours. You have to break it up because as you're pushing on the blade, the circulation to your hand gets cut off.
Oh, okay.
This finger goes numb first. When this finger goes numb, it's time to stop. And I've got these little exercise balls. I just sit there and play with them for about 30 minutes until my hands are all flowing again, and then pick up the blades and go again.
I saw you at the NAMM show, and you were holding a drum and engraving it. Are you always holding the drum when you're engraving it? It's not clamped in anything. You're holding it in your hand. Usually, you've got to change the surface.
Yeah, you're rotating the thing around.
And you've got to hold it at the right angle. So one of your hands is occupied.
Oh, well, this hand's always engraving. This hand's always
holding the drum.
Flipping it around because you'll
and it's
do
on
an
your
overstroke.
knee, I guess, or
yeah, it just
so it's constantly. I mean, there's a rhythm to it, I would imagine, over time.
Well, I get into a groove. I sit out on my porch and do it. It's really a low-tech thing. It's like sitting on the porch whittling. I've got a little table.
So it's just like you're all relaxed, creating art, and it's no.
My cat's out there trying to crawl into my lap, and it's. Just
you're just like having a cup of tea on the porch.
Yeah, it's an Andy Griffith moment,
Yeah, that's how Picasso did it. Just sitting on the porch.
Yeah, sitting on the porch, painting pictures.
Painted a picture. Some weird shapes on it.
Yeah.
Sold for a lot of money.
Yeah, I used to.
That's the
used to
secret.
engrave when I first started. I was working on the first Ludwig limited edition, and I wasn't very good. I wasn't a good engraver back then, but I was the only engraver they knew. Well, a fella from about 10 miles down the road from their factory who worked at a trophy shop had done a little bit of hand engraving, and he underbid me by $10.
Oh my goodness!
And he took that job away from me. So I spent the next, I guess, 5 or 6 years really working on getting better, so nobody could ever take a job away from me again. So
you get what you pay for.
That's right. And
who is that guy? Nobody knows that guy.
Well, he's not there, and I'm not going to mention his name just for pure cussedness. He cost me $10.
He cost John Aldridge $10, the best drum engraver in modern history.
Well, I'm not the best. I'm just the one that everybody knows. There's engravers on this planet that can just engrave me into a puddle in the road.
Well, I've seen some of the lugs have been engraved in some of the drums.
Yeah, now that's done by a different guy.
Right. That was another engraver. So.
Yeah. What is his name? Jay. I'll remember it before we finish. Jay is a modern engraver. He uses a thing called a Gravermeister, and that's the machine I was telling you about. A Gravermeister has the same tool that I have, but coming out of the back of it is a hydraulic tube. And that hydraulic tube provides air pressure to a piston inside that handle. So he puts the blade down, and the piston actually, with his foot control, speeds the piston up and it pushes the blade along. He guides it. But here's the kicker. You notice those are small patterns, and they're very, very intricate. He's cutting on the side of a tube lug.
Exactly.
A surface is less than 1/4 of an inch wide, and it's a really hard radius. I can't even cut that with a hand tool. My hand tools just skid right off of it.
Sure.
But he's sitting at a microscope. He's got a microscope here at his eye level that's going down and then shooting down on what he's doing. He's doing all of this stuff looking like this into a microscope, making that stuff in it. It amazes me. It's a machine, and I don't have any desire to run it, but I sure do think it makes pretty work. But
Wow.
this fellow, his real job is sitting there making rings. He creates faceted settings for rings.
Oh, okay.
He's a jewelry engraver.
Okay, well, we're DRUMline, so if we were jewelry.com,
Carlin is his
we
name.
can care more about that. But when we look at those drums and we see that, no, I made a little joke there. Of course, that engraving on the lugs is fascinating. But when we see the John Aldridge, I mean, I've got 2 at home, and like half the time, I mean, I have one of them sitting there and I do play it, but the other one's like, sometimes you don't want to even touch that drum.
And that's a sad
You know what I
thing,
mean?
you know? If I'm going to put all that effort into
It's
making
sad.
a pretty drum, I want somebody to take it out and whack it.
Well, I'll be playing it,
Yeah.
but it's like, I don't know, man. Somebody said that the 100th anniversary Ludwig drum. It's like, do you frame it or do you play it? I'm not really too sure what you do with it.
I was doing drums for Tama and Ludwig at the same time there in my office in Nashville, and Ricky Rocket came in. He was with DW, and he was looking at the drums I had on display, and he said, "Boy, these are really cool, but I've got a drum that was done by a master engraver back in the late 90s." I said, "Really? You do?" "Yeah, what kind of drum is it?" "It's a DW." I said, "Well, does it have a little R above the butt that looks like it's running?" He said, "Well, I guess it does." I did that. He has it in a glass table or a lucite table in his living room. It's like, come on, man, play the drum.
Well, I already said that in the article. If you see your drums, you pretty much know it's a John Aldridge almost.
Well, there's another couple of guys out there that have done a bunch of work, but they came at it from being engravers, and I think that's why everybody has rallied around me and been so nice to me, is because I'm a drummer, and I started doing this because I couldn't afford the drum that I'm doing.
Well, we're lucky.
Yeah, so now I can afford it, and I have a couple of them. But right now I'm working mostly with Joyful Noise, and then just doing custom jobs for individuals. I just did some stuff for Ludwig for one of their Italian distributors, but no major production runs right now. Obviously, with REO on tour all the time,
Right.
it's hard to get a production run completed.
Do you do some drums while you're out on tour, or you
No.
don't have any time for that?
Well, I mean, like sometimes when we're on tour and I have a day off, I'll go to a drum store.
Okay.
And they'll have a custom job there waiting for me. I'll sit there in the
okay.
shop and engrave, and people come in and watch and see how
Oh,
it's
that's
done.
kind of neat.
And then at the Chicago show, I'll always engrave a drum there for somebody. Always calls and says, "Hey, who's reserved you for the Chicago show?"
Well, if you guys donate to DRUMline, someday I can get a drum and we'll do our logo.
There you go. There you go. You send me a drum, I'll put your DRUMline logo on it. No
Yeah,
charge.
someday.
Special deal for you.
Oh,
Just for you.
shoot. No.
No.
I'll trade you something.
Trade me something.
I'll give you a video of my cats wrestling.
There
My
you go.
dog's
A
wrestling,
cat
actually.
wrestling
No, my
video.
dog's wrestling. It's really funny, and you can
You're a sick
entertain you
puppy.
on the road.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. That's not really a fair trade.
I don't know. Cat juggling.
I just lost my drum, I think, based upon cat juggling. I mean, not since the jerk, Steve Martin, have we had a good dose of cat juggling.
We haven't had a good cat juggling.
And I've got
video
some
in a
barn
while.
cats that showed up. If I can do a cat juggling video,
No.
but he used socks.
Yeah, you did.
I mean, he gathered the cats.
have you ever seen my drum juggling?
But then they cut
picture?
away. Oh yes, your drum juggling. Well, it's on Drumline.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
I
I just took it off your Facebook,
Uh,
and it's got you there, and you're juggling 3 drums.
Somebody had asked me, how are you juggling the Ludwig and Tama accounts at the same time? Because takes a long time to engrave a drum. And so I took that picture, just like this. And I took it, just basically took 4 pictures. One of me standing there like this, and another with me holding each of the drums in each position. And I just cut everything with the drums out of the other 3 pictures and overlaid them.
You gave that secret away online, and somebody said you shouldn't give away your magic tricks.
Yeah.
But
hey,
you know what the thing is, you shared all your secrets how to do it, but it's impossible to do. So, what difference does it make?
Anybody wants to learn, I'll certainly teach them. It'd be nice to have. I've taught 2 people how to engrave.
I couldn't even pinstripe.
One of them got to be really good at it, and he did like 2 or 3 drums and just gave up on it. And I said, "Why did you stop? You just got good enough to do stuff." And he goes, "Well, it's really tedious and boring." I said, "Well, I told you that before you started." He said, "Well, I didn't really believe it was that tedious or that boring."
Yeah, the great people always make it look easy.
It's like watching grass grow, man. It's the
anybody
slowest process in the
anybody
world.
out there can do it.
Yeah, yeah, you can do this.
Okay.
You want to engrave?
Yeah, if you want to engrave a stair door,
Just write me
Maybe-
email me.
maybe not.
I'll give you the 10-minute lesson in an email.
Maybe just save up and get one of John's.
There you go.
It's
I
gonna
like
look,
that
it's
even
gonna
better.
look better, and he's gonna be happier.
And I'll eat better.